So George St. Pierre vacating the UFC middleweight title. So Dana White puts language in the contract that states if he gives George the Michael Bisping fight, if he won, his next fight would be a defense of that belt against Robert Whittaker. Now, Dana also said he put that language in the contract because he knew St. Pierre wouldn't do it, that he would not fight Robert Whittaker. I know Matt Serra said earlier that he thought that would actually be a fight that would appeal to George St. Pierre, but Dana isn't surprised, and therefore he doesn't seem too upset by it. I don't even think Dana ever wanted to make the St. Pierre Bisping fight, but as I said when it was announced, when Michael Jordan says, hey, I want to come back to the NBA, like, you open the door, and that's exactly what they did. George came back, was able to win a UFC middleweight championship, with all due respect to Bisping, against a hand-picked opponent, and now he walks away. Again, if Dana's not pissed, I'm not, but you can understand, Kenny, why fans were frustrated that the Bisping GSP fight was made in the first place, and frustrated to see St. Pierre walk away, whether it's the colitis or not. I mean, the colitis that, like, I'm not just going to chalk everything up to colitis here,
Right. No, I get that. I understand that. Obviously, George St. Pierre, a former welterweight, I think he wanted that fight against Michael Bisping to do something that's never been done before. I think he wanted more of a challenge. He wanted a higher profile fighter in Michael Bisping. And Michael Bisping is the highest profile fighter at middleweight, whether he's the champion or not. He's got the biggest name. He's been around for a very long time. He's found himself in a lot of big fights. Because of that, I think that's what was so enticing and appealing to George St. Pierre, to take that fight. To be honest, I kind of agree with you. Again, I'm not surprised he's defending the belt, or he's not going to defend the belt. But this ulcer colitis thing, it is real. He had to gain a lot of weight to make middleweight. He was trying to eat as much as possible. Did not work out for him. George St. Pierre eats a lot of meat. He was eating a lot to get ready for Bisping. And there were guys in his camp that actually didn't want him to fight. They were really concerned with what was happening to him and how he was feeling. So he almost had to drop out of the Bisping fight because of it. Very unfortunate. It's very, very painful thing to deal with. I talked to George earlier last week. He said that he was in a tremendous amount of pain. He's been to the doctors. He has it now under control. His weight is now gone from like being around 197 to 187. He's lost around 10 to 12 pounds or something like that, he told me. Yeah, he said if he fights again, it's going to be closer to 170. He said what he did to his body was not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that this fight was against Robert Whittaker, I think he did have an intention of fighting and defending his belt. If he felt good, I think he would have ended up probably fighting Robert Whittaker. And you know what? If there's someone who goes and does something like this and says, you know what, I'm going to vacate the belt, it's George St. Pierre. I think he's a guy who's done everything in this sport. I think if there's one guy who's allowed to do it, it is George St. Pierre. So it's unfortunate, but again, hopefully we see him back, and hopefully we see him back in and around 170 pounds against another quality fighter. I know Tyron Woodley obviously has been looking for that fight, and I know when I talked to George, George's main concern was, you know what, Kenny, I don't want to hold up this division. I don't want to hold up this division. There's a lot of other guys that are doing that. I know Luke Rockhold has been wanting this shot as well. Let these guys fight and take the belt, and we'll see what happens with me.
And I should be more sensitive to the colitis. And you're right. I feel like he vacated quickly, right? And they're able to put the belt that he won on the line 3 months, just over 3 months and a week after he won the thing, right? So I think largely he did the right decision here, vacating the title. And we're obviously getting a great headliner in Perth, Australia. I guess a little bit frustrated.
And I totally get that frustration. I mean, I totally understand the frustration of you and the fans as well, because obviously people want to see a champ go and defend his belt. And I know things have been kind of screwy across the board in the UFC with a lot of that.
Couple fight announcements since we were last on the air. Chief among them, Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou. Of course, they're doing it in the goddamn City of Champions. TD Garden opened that night. Boston, Massachusetts, getting the heavyweight title fight, the light heavyweight title fight. It's nice when your boss is from your hometown, right? It's nice because you know he's going to stack the deck at Boston every goddamn time.
He better.
So as people in New York turn this podcast off and maybe click on another one, it shall be done. Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou. It is going to happen pretty quickly. Stipe was in training camp, right? Perhaps there was a contract thing that needed to be cleared up. Maybe he's got a new contract, I guess. Either way, it's signed, sealed. It'll be delivered January 20th. and Francis Ngannou is the betting favorite, Ken Flo. Quick thoughts from you on Stipe Francis coming up in about 6 weeks.
Yeah, 2 words for that Boston main event: wicked pissa. What a fight, man! What a fight. Both of these guys, they haven't faced a fighter like the other. They simply haven't. Stipe Miocic, I don't think he's ever faced a guy that big with that kind of punching power, a guy with that kind of skill, a guy who can read him as well as a Francis Ngannou. And Francis is just so confident right now. To that effect, I think Francis has never faced an excellent grappler and wrestler like a Stipe Miocic, and also a guy who can knock him out as well. People sleep on Stipe Miocic's skill, his power, his ability to mix things up and to fight smart game plans now. He's been doing that for the last few years. Again, for Stipe Miocic, this is a fight about, is he the greatest heavyweight fighter in UFC history? If he beats Francis Ngannou, he will solidify himself as that. If Francis Ngannou beats Stipe Miocic, I think we have a huge superstar on our hands. Either way, even if he loses, I think this is a guy that you will absolutely see again. Still pretty early in his career. But, man, I absolutely believe that if Francis wins that fight, he'll probably hold on to that belt for a very long time.
And I just love the fact that they're turning him around quickly. This was a long wait, right? He beat Andrei Arlovsky in January and had to wait 11 months to get in there with Alistair Overeem. So I like the fact that Stipe's ready, and it'll be an abbreviated training camp for Ngannou after a quick fight. And that's your headliner coming up in the Bean January 20th at UFC 220. Then the next pay-per-view, UFC 221, Perth, Australia. It'll be Robert Whittaker's first defense of his now undisputed middleweight championship against the former champion Luke Rockhold. And I know Luke listens to the Anakin Florian podcast, so I just want to tell you, Luke, you got to leave now. Like, literally, you need to fucking leave now. Right. Like, I have my passport right here. I'm leaving, like, now. God, that Perth itinerary, every time I look at it, dude, it gives me, like, high anxiety.
It takes you 3 days to get there, yeah.
So hopefully Luke, who has competed in Sydney, Kenny, will heed my advice and get to Perth plenty early. This is a great fight, and I think Whittaker's going to open as the betting favorite. I think a lot of people think he's going to be able to test and pass that test that is the Rockhold shin. A lot of elements to this fight, Kenny, but 2 guys largely in their prime, 2 of the top 10 or 15 guys pound for pound in the world. It's huge that this fight is happening, and fittingly it is for that undisputed title.
Luke Rockhold, this is what you've been asking for. You've been complaining about other people getting the shot.
Right.
This is your shot, my man. This is your shot. This is your opportunity to go out there and try to take a belt from a guy who you said is really a welterweight, who probably doesn't deserve it. So I think they did the right thing here. I think Luke Rockhold absolutely deserves this shot. This is not an easy style matchup for him. Robert Whittaker is going to be much faster than him. He's got a left hook from hell, which could be a real problem for guys like Luke Rockhold, who is a southpaw. That's the same shot that Michael Bisping caught him with. David Branch was able to catch and hurt Luke Rockhold. So for Luke Rockhold, he cannot get lazy. He needs to be in this fight, present for this whole fight. He needs to keep his hands up. Luke sometimes has a tendency of trying to counter himself with a right hook, and he keeps his hands low so he can throw a punch that you don't quite see. Can't do this against someone like Whittaker, who used to fight at welterweight and carries a speed that is very unusual for the middleweight division, man. Also has been wrestling a lot, so he's not going to be easy to take down. So I think Luke has a huge advantage if this fight hits the mat. Luke, I think, could definitely submit him, but he cannot fight the way he fought against David Branch. I know it was kind of a long layoff. He was coming off an injury and all that stuff, but he has to be extremely sharp here against Whittaker. Luke is a guy that I think a lot of people thought would have the belt for a very long time. He has this opportunity now to get that belt back and hold on it for a while.